Tens of thousands of Brazilians demonstrated against the government last weekend. They're frustrated with the handling of the pandemic. So far, nearly 600,000 Brazilians have died from the virus. It's the highest death toll in the world after the United States. Many Brazilians lost their jobs during lockdowns, while prices for rent, food and gas are on the rise. Much of the South American giant's population has been left impoverished, with no way out in sight. Hello and welcome to our COVID-19 special. I'm Monica Jones. Good to have you with us. Well, once projected to be the fifth largest economy in the world, Brazil has tumbled to number 12. In the country's largest city, Sao Paulo, entire families are now homeless because they can no longer afford to pay the rent. The coronavirus pandemic hitting an already fragile economy. For many Brazilians, it's the perfect storm.
Teresinha used to live alone near downtown Sao Paulo. But when she could no longer afford the rent, she moved here, on the outskirts of the city, where she now lives with a niece. Her daily battle is to buy food. This is the cheapest place to market in her neighborhood, yet she has to negotiate prices. The economic crisis caused by the pandemic almost destroyed her job as a freelance pollster. She is 61 years old, has no husband or children, and is now running out of money. Today, I leave the market with my cart half full. Before, with the same money, I would leave with a full cart and even with little bags in my hands. Teresinha is just one example of what millions of Brazilians are experiencing in these days. According to the latest authorities report, just in the month of July in the state of Sao Paulo, there was an 11% increase in food prices. The economic crisis is visible in the streets of Sao Paulo. 100 people live here, in Praça de Sé, in the heart of the city. Here they sleep, cook, and eat. Although there are no official figures on the increase of homelessness in the city, NGOs agree that it has skyrocketed. Serfa's Foundation provides meals for the homeless on a daily basis. Before the pandemic, they served about 12,000 meals a month. In August 2021, the number doubled.
In
April 2020, we were receiving mostly single men. Now, in 2021, many families arrive. Women with children, couples. The cost of living in Sao Paulo has risen dramatically over the last few months. The Institute of Economic Research determined that electricity, for example, increased 25% during the last year. Other items, such as meat, have registered increases of up to 40%. On one hand, we have inflation, which destroys purchasing power, and on the other, the difficulties in the labor market, a consequence of the pandemic. In addition, politicians are not offering a solution for families. It is a critical moment. Teresinha notes the rising of cost of living. Her electricity bill for August was 30% more expensive than the previous month. Debts keep her awake at nights. And the future for Brazilians is not bright. According to official figures, 14% of the population is unemployed, as the country reports the highest inflation rates of the last 20 years. And the pandemic, which caused the crisis, shows no signs of coming to an end.
And for more, I'm joined by Lina Simit, senior researcher on poverty and inequality at Human Rights Watch, and she joins us in New York. Good morning to you. I just talked about a perfect storm, and normally we use that phrase when two critical events come together. In Brazil's case, it's certainly the coronavirus pandemic. And what else?
In fact, there are many things that are coming together in Brazil, but one of them is certainly this huge inequality crisis that has been boiling in Brazil for many years. Brazil is one of the most unequal countries in the world and the most unequal country in the region. And we see how the pandemic has really exacerbated many of these existing economic but also social inequalities in terms of who has been pushed into poverty, who cannot afford food or water, the way they need to, and now rely on sort of unsafe systems or the transfers that the government has not provided to them sufficiently.
Where else in the world do we see similar patterns, especially now during the pandemic, which is clearly driving poverty?
In fact, we see it all over the world. The COVID pandemic has exacerbated inequality in European countries, in Latin America, as much as in Asia or Africa. And what we see is that in countries that already had high inequality and lacking social protection systems, that's really where sort of the poverty crisis now is among the worst, because these systems really lack protection for people who lost income, lost jobs during the pandemic, and who have not recovered. And many of these workers, or many of these people, work in the informal economy. And just to say that this is not a small share of the population, but in many regions, it's the vast majority of the people working informally, without labor protections, without social protections, when they lose work, when they lose income, when they fall ill. It just means having no income at all and no ability to buy the things you need for basic survival.
But clearly, when a huge part of the population suffers, as you just described, and your research certainly focuses on social protection measures that fail to prevent people from falling into poverty, a lot has gone wrong. What can be done better next time?
I would say at the beginning of the pandemic, it was actually quite encouraging to see how countries have expanded existing protection measures or introduced new ones. But many of the flaws that we have seen so clearly this last year, those are the ones that should be fixed moving forward. And that includes inadequate coverage, where in the case of Nigeria, just to give you an example, less than 1% of the population received cash transfers last year, although more than 50% of the population went hungry. In the amounts of social protection were also often insufficient, with monthly payments of less than the minimum wage or less than the poverty threshold in the respective countries. We also see that in many instances there were issues around corruption, so the lack of transparency where the money has gone, and therefore really relying sort of on informal systems, since the countries haven't set up sort of solid structures for social protection systems prior. So really rethinking the need for investing in stronger systems moving forward is absolutely essential.
Right. I mean, investing in stronger system, there are some who argue that we actually need a global health governance rooted in principles of justice and governed by the common good, and an institution to represent and serve these common interests, as well as a moral constitution for our planet's health. That's quite a tall order. And I take it the WHO does not fit the bill here. What exactly are we looking at?
So I would say in two areas. On the one hand, around the global structures, I think on vaccinations, at least, we need to really push powerful and higher income countries in sharing the recipe of the vaccine with others, because the inequalities currently in vaccination coverage and access are enormous. Where in high income countries you have 60% of the population now vaccinated, and in poor countries it's just 3%.
Right.
So really much more solidarity.
One?
And the second one relates to social protection. Here too, higher income countries had a much greater possibility to invest and protect their populations, and therefore there should be more solidarity in building out some sort of global fund for social protection.
All right, Lina Siemann there. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Time for one of your questions now. Here's Derek Williams.
Are there any studies showing that air pollution increases mortality from COVID-19?
Long-term exposure to significant levels of air pollution is a major factor in death and suffering worldwide. The WHO estimates that it kills around 7 million people a year globally. That's more than the number of deaths caused by infectious diseases and similar to the number associated with smoking. So it's no wonder that many studies have looked at the links between air pollution and COVID-19 during the course of the pandemic. And it shouldn't come as much of a surprise that a potentially serious respiratory disease can pretty clearly affect people a lot worse who are regularly exposed to high levels of air contaminants. Let's look a little closer at just one of those studies, which searched for correlations between air pollution and COVID cases in England last summer. It found, even after adjusting for confounding factors like population density and age and income, that in areas with regular high levels of toxic gases and particulate matter, places like London or the Midlands region, residents were significantly more likely to be infected with SARS-CoV-2 or to die from COVID-19 than people in other parts of the country. The association was particularly strong when it came to areas with high levels of the nitrogen oxides and very fine particulate matter that mostly comes from burning fuel. The researchers concluded that even a small increase in air pollution had a big effect on both COVID infectivity and mortality in the country. And there are plenty of other studies from other countries that back up and corroborate those results.
And that's all for this edition of our COVID-19 special. From me and the team, thanks for watching.